So would you please help me welcome Executive Director of V3, Zach Elliott.
Hey, good evening. That's a pretty formal way to say it. Don't you love Oxford Exchange? And at Christmas, it's like the happiest thing that's ever happened. So good to see you. Tough act to follow, Michael Barnum. Michael, thank you for all you do. And thank you all for being here. It is an honor to get to be at Oxford Exchange for our final art unveiling of the year. So before we do anything else, would you just say thank you to Laura and the staff at Oxford Exchange? They've been unbelievable to us. So thank you. There is something about beauty that helps us discover what is good and know what is true. And it's why architecture matters. It's why art matters. It's why we who are made in the image of a God who makes matter. And I'm sure at your home this season, there's little things that are enchanting your spaces that maybe don't show up at every moment of the year. So nights like tonight are really special, especially at this time of year, because no matter what kind of architecture, what kind of art we're looking at, everything has a bit of wonder and the whole world starts to slow. It may not feel like that for you quite yet. But one of my favorite authors, Frederick Buechner, said, time is like a river. It just races forward. And you can't stop it, but you can bend it. And tonight, what I hope to do is bend it. And so I'm intentionally going to slow us down a little bit because right behind me is a magnificent visual rendering, visual interpretation of the Annunciation of Mary. But which is an ancient and beautiful story that's been told so many times by some of the world's greatest artists. We thought a year ago, wouldn't it be incredible to find another one of the world's greatest artists and invite her to take that same challenge, to think deeply about the significance of what we're about to celebrate, and to allow us to encounter it and to know, not just with the text that we read, as if you, like in my house, we grew up reading the Christmas story, but to know it because we are impacted and encountering something that comes through beauty. And so tonight we're going to get to turn our attention with a little bit of slow bend in the river and just look at a moment when God became flesh and the whole story turned. As C.S. Lewis said, it's the moment the diver went all the way down to lift up a creation and bring it up. And it's the most magnificent story that's been told. So we can't wait to tell it through visual art. I'm so glad that you are here. And so let me, without further ado, introduce our artist for the evening, our final featured artist for 2024. Emily Pastor is a classically trained fine artist specializing in representational oil painting. Her work has been exhibited nationally and recognized by prestigious organizations such as the Somdi Club in New York City, Oil Painters of America, and the Art Renewal Center. Emily's paintings are known for being technically advanced and emotionally sensitive. Emily and her husband, Paul, live in Oregon with their three children. We are honored to have a once-in-a-generation artist like Emily with us. Would you welcome Emily Pastor? Okay, I don't normally get nervous. I'm kind of nervous.
I'm nervous too.
I was like, I don't know if I'm nervous because you're here or because you're all here, but...
Well, Zach, I live in the woods and our town is half the size of the people in here, so I get to be nervous.
I love it. Emily, thank you. You flew out from Oregon
right.
A couple days ago to be here and to kind of get a sense of our city. But and so we've got lots of fun stories to tell from Tampa. But for everybody who's never been to the Pacific Northwest, why don't you carry us up to that really enchanted place where you get to make and create? What do you look at when you walk out in the morning? What are some of the things you get to see and feel and experience?
Yeah, so we live in a really unique part of Oregon. It's a practical ghost town, and yet it's about 30 minutes away from Portland, Oregon, which is the biggest city in Oregon. So we live in an actual gorge, and there's the Columbia River that separates Washington Washington and Oregon. So we live on the Oregon side, and we can see Washington from our house. So Paul and I joke that we live in a model train set because we can see 3 highways, 2 train tracks, barge activity, airplanes. So it's both very wild. We live up next to the state forest, and there's waterfalls and big fir trees. We'll occasionally see cougars cross the road. We've had bears in our front yard and elk. So it's a very interesting place because you're close to civilization, and yet you're so close to this really wild place as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I love about Oregon. There's a wildness to it. And how many people have been out west to the Northwest? Okay, good. Yeah, good.
Awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful. If you haven't had a chance, go. There is a wildness to it. And I think it is good for creativity. Some of the most wonderful bands have come out of Seattle and Portland, and there's a great music scene there. There's a great art scene. There's a great food scene. There's just something that's beautifully good in the dirt. Creatively for you, another thing that it's known for out there is gray clouds and skies and things like that. And I'm always curious for an artist that's doing work like you're doing, visual art, are you susceptible to those seasonal changes, or is Oregon like perfect? I can paint every single season.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be in Tampa. You guys have some sun, which is wonderful because, like I said, we live at the bottom of this gorge. So there's about 2 to 3 months every year that even if it's a sunny day, and we don't get many of those, the sun doesn't actually make it above the hill behind our house. So we literally are in shadow for 2 to 3 months out of the year. And it's very poetic because the sun comes back and hits our property on Epiphany, which is around January 6th. And it feels liturgical and spiritual and amazing. But it's also pretty depressing some of the times.
It's okay to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's everybody's here to get to know you.
Yeah.
And in a few minutes, we're going to get to unveil this piece. And as I mentioned, the Annunciation, people have been thinking about this, painting this, wondering about this moment for a long, long time. So we'll talk about the piece in a second. But we reached out to you because of your particular gift for representational art, and we wanted an oil representation of this moment. And so not all of us are familiar with that particular discipline. Can you just talk a little bit about how you decided to focus on oil and representational art, and then some of the training that prepared you to be able to take a commission like this, where we literally just invited you into a prompt and a conversation, and you were able to take it and develop that idea. So how did oil become your medium? And then what's the training and experience that helped to prepare you to be able to take on projects of this scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended what's called an atelier program, and it's kind of the old way of teaching how to draw and how to paint. It's where you study with someone who has learned from other masters, and you spend a year doing drawing, and then you spend a second year just doing grayscale painting, and then you spend a third year with color theory and kind of putting all those skills together. So I had a wonderful instructor, Jerry Sumter, who's just a delightful human being, and I studied with him for about 4 years. And I didn't go into the program with a desire to do oil painting. I just really wanted to learn how to draw, and I saw the oil painting as a bonus. But I just fell in love with it. And I still remember there was a moment where when we were starting color, he squeezed out alizarin crimson onto the palette, and that's a very rich red. And I got butterflies. Like, I remember the moment. I was just like so excited to see that color, and I was like, "Oh, I think I'm on the right track if it makes me feel that way." So oil painting in general is just a long tradition. They have paintings back to the 600s with oil paints. So it's a long-standing tradition, and it's very archival, meaning it will last for, thousands of years. So when you're doing a painting like this and you want it to last, kind of the best way to do it is to look in the past and what they did and mimic those techniques.
Yeah. It seems like at least from our view, V3, part of our work is we just believe deeply that the West has an opportunity. It's a really actually exciting moment, whether it's architecture or fine art, or it's working with sculpting, musical art. We just finished a symphony project with Constantine. Are you here? Put a hand up. Our composer from our symphonies right back
Wonderful.
there. So we've done some amazing projects like this. And it feels like our moment right now is a moment where there needs to be serious investment in the arts in the West again. And particularly for us, from a religious background, we're a religious organization, and those two things are not divorced. If you think about some of the most beautiful places in the world, the places that just, they actually set you back and cause you to be silent and still. And that's, beauty is a penultimate thing, a transcendent thing, a transcendental. It carries you to the thing beyond itself. I think we need more of that. And here's why I was so excited to hear about the program and the course of study, and that there's more and more interest in recovering that old tradition and that older way of representational art, even as a desired medium, because it allows us to encounter stories that we maybe are very familiar with. Malcolm Guite says there's a fog of familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be you tonight. You might have grown up hearing the Christmas story or reading that at home. And when this was unveiled for us, what it did for me is I got to encounter a moment where all of that story that was very familiar was right there for drawing me in. And then there were particular things going on in my own story that intersected with that piece. And it's amazing how art does that.
Yeah.
In a moment like this, where you get to unveil and share a piece, which we're going to do in about like 2 minutes, I'm going to get there. Do you get nervous about people encountering work like this? I mean, it seems to me this is probably the most vulnerable thing. We've been so heavily guarded, like Taylor Swift looks like a freshman to us. We've worked so hard to keep this a secret. Is it a moment like this? Is there nerves going?
I think there's more nerves just to talk than to show the painting. I want the painting to talk for itself. I'm just very, very excited. You know, when you work on something like this, it's we were talking a lot, you know, in the last couple of days just about like the process of labor and of, you know, bringing new life into the world. And one of the reasons I was so excited that you approached me with this story is because the Annunciation is very close to me. In my art life too, of just this idea, you know, Madeleine L'Engle said that the artist is a birth giver. You know, you have something that comes to you as inspiration, and your job is not to pick it apart and overthink it. Your job is to do the best you can with integrity and try to give birth to that. And then you don't really always control what you give birth to. I mean, who has kids here? You do your best, and they're amazing people, but it kind of has a life of its own. So I'm excited to let it have a life of its own and let people come to it with what they have and get something out of it. But I think my greatest hope for tonight is that people would be blessed by it and feel a sense of encouragement.
Yeah. Well, we're super honored that you chose to be here tonight. We're going to unveil it. The hope for our ministry is to make public art. And so what's amazing about our patrons and our partners is they partner with us to do projects like this with the hope that they will travel and that people will encounter beauty like this. And so this piece is going to hang here thanks to Oxford's incredible generosity through the holidays. It'll be right here in Tampa. After that, it's probably headed to some of our best institutions and universities around the country. And then from there, through our art loan program, it's available to anyone who has a public-facing institution and wants to reach out and participate in bringing beauty like this into the public space. So an amazing thing that we all get to do together, but it wouldn't be possible without artists like Emily. To set this up for the unveiling, here's all I'm going to do. We reached out to Emily almost 8 months ago with the idea, and the idea was simply to say, what would it have been like for Mary after the traditional Annunciation moment is the moment she is hearing that she is with child and that God is going to overshadow her with the Most High, and something miraculous is going to take place, something that is unexpected and is surprising, and God is going to take on flesh. This is the moment of the Annunciation. And what captured my imagination is, what would it have been like for Mary a few days after that? maybe you've had one of those moments where you say, like, only God. Like, that would have been impossible. And you maybe are even scratching your head and going, now I can reason that one or figure that one out, or I want to figure it out intellectually. And then there's that other part of you that goes, I don't know, it's a mystery, but God has done something. And then a few days later, you're still in awe of that day. That's what was on my mind. What would it have been like a few days after Mary has had time to kind of let this incredible news sink in? And if we got to encounter her in that moment, what would she be communicating in that moment?
Yeah.
Should we unveil it?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
You might have to grab your mic. Would you tell us the title? I kind of hinted at it, but the title of the painting.
Yeah, the title, this was a really hard one to title because this is such an awkward place. I told Zach that I usually don't name a piece or title a piece until after it's created because it does kind of take on a life of its own. And I want to let it kind of tell me what its name is. So the final name is Mary Overshadowed, and I think that you'll see why. And we can talk more about kind of other things after we unveil it.
We're going to talk about the piece. Be gracious. Okay. There's tape behind it. Ready?
All right. Tell me when.
1, 2, Nobody wants me to tell you.
Isn't that frame amazing?
Absolutely beautiful.
Should we sit down?
Yeah, let's do it. One of my favorite things about nights like this is to be in a place where you get to be 2 feet away, which when we're wrapped up, we're going to give everybody a chance to come up and stand right here and just really take the art in. And so I invite you to do that. We're going to make time for that. But to get to have a conversation with the artist who spent hours and hours and hours thinking about that prompt and thinking about that moment and giving her life, it's extraordinary. So we're gonna
I'm excited about
dive
this.
in. Yeah. Let's start with the frame because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
When we started this piece, we imagined framing it, and you sent us a couple options. And this was the frame that you said, I think this is going to serve the piece the best. So tell us a little bit about the frame maker, and where that came from, because it's a part of the piece.
Yeah, the frame maker, it's a company in Utah called Masterworks Frames, and they are just the top tier when it comes to frames. I have a little bit of a frame addiction, so this is like my dream frame for the painting, and I sent it to Zach, just crossing my fingers, and he was totally on board. But yeah, it's solid wood, and it's gold leaf too, so there's real gold on there. But I loved the arch of it. It's called a tabernacle frame. And it really does feel like that. It feels like you're looking through a window and you're seeing Mary on the other side. So it really draws you in. It doesn't distract from the painting, but it enhances it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you some open territory because this is the most fun. We send you the prompt. We say, here's the story, this moment. We're familiar with it. Henry Tanner's done it. There's so many great artists that have taken us into that moment. And we said, take us a few days later. Where do you start? How did you start? And then what was your process like? Just unfold that and take time.
Yeah, well, I started the process. One thing that I really appreciated about Zach and Cami is that they had a strong vision for what they wanted to have an experience of, but they gave me a lot of creative freedom when it came to how that would actually look. So I sent Zach some questions just to let me know, like, what are you hoping the viewer will feel? Are you hoping that this painting will be light or dark? And I loved his response because it was warm. I want this painting to be warm. And I love the idea of having this painting after the Annunciation because, like Zach said, there are so many paintings of that moment. And as I thought about it, it kind of reminded me of like when you see a beautiful sunset, what you want to do is you're yelling for whoever you love to come look at the sunset because it's so beautiful and you know it's fleeting. You know the colors are going to change and it's going to fade. And that's what the Annunciation to me feels like. It's this beautiful moment where we know everything is changing. This is a pivotal moment in human history. And so artists are attracted to that. We want to paint that. We want to say, look at this, quick, come here, see it. So when Zach was talking about this painting, he said he wanted people to feel unsettled by how settled Mary was. And I loved that because one of the things I really wanted to capture about Mary was her humility, but the strength of that humility, because she had something that she was going to do that was given to her as a task that she was being obedient to. And it takes a tremendous amount of determination and grit to do something that's asked of you. So I think sometimes when we think of humility, we think of, subservient or deferring to other people. But I wanted to show a side of Mary that was setting her face like flint. And this idea that maybe Jesus gained a little bit of his courage to set his face like flint towards Jerusalem because he saw that character quality in his mother.
Yeah. That unsettled by her sense of being settled, you captured that. It came through when I saw your first sketches, and I was so excited about that. We'll circle back to this because something is happening in this moment where Mary, and it's known as the Marian way, that she doesn't have all the answers. She doesn't know exactly how God is doing what he has done or what all will come on the other side of it. But she knows that God has acted and that she is participating in something and being obedient to God as he's invited her into a mystery. And she conveys, I think, to this painting helps me reflect on the confidence of sometimes you need somebody else's faith to help you because you're not quite as settled as they are. And I love that she's had a moment to understand who God is and what he's done. And then she sees us and says, you too, right? That this is not just that this is going to break out like the dawn. So there is some light coming from behind. Yeah. Take us into then, how do you position to tell that story? We knew the feeling, we knew what we maybe hoped viewers would encounter or experience from her, but there's particular elements that are helping unfold the story that's in the gospel and then also in the tradition of painters who have painted this before. So help us kind of find those things.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that was important to you and also important to me was to have a nod towards past representations of Mary and of this story. So you'll notice she's holding a lily, and in a lot of Annunciation paintings of the past, Gabriel is coming to Mary and he is holding the lily and he's offering it as a symbol of peace, but also a symbol of purity and of innocence. So I really wanted her to be holding the lily, like she has accepted that and now she's holding that. So that's what the lily is there. The other element that I felt really strongly about was it happening at sunrise. I wanted it to be a sunrise painting to allude to Isaiah 60, where it says, "Arise and shine, for your light has come," and also the passage of Zacharias prophesying from Isaiah 9, that a dawn will break upon you. So there's so much imagery. Read your Bibles and you'll just see, looking to the east and light and dawn. In terms of composition, so I knew I had to find a model for the painting, and there was a woman at our church, Clementine, and she came to my mind, she came to my husband's mind of like, she would be the perfect person for this. She had the demeanor, she had just the faith, and that was really important. I didn't want to just go find a model. I wanted a model who really believed in this story and had the faith herself. So I asked her, and she got up at 4:30 in the morning this summer to go out. This is the Columbia River right here. There's an island called Thunder Island, and we went out there, did a bunch of photo shoots. But right before the photo shoot, she and her husband came to me, and she said, "Emily, the story is real." And I was like, "What do you mean the story is real?" She's like, "We're pregnant." So it was so amazing because as I was taking these reference photos, she was newly pregnant and she was feeling those feelings of what it's like to have new life in you and with your first child, and that hope and that awe and that mystery. So it just felt like, the way was being smoothed and straightened in front of this project in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. I love the placement of the lily too, that there's all of these little nods that this painting can just unfold and unfold. And the more you know the Bible, this is what's so beautiful about art and the Christian tradition of making great art, is that it's in conversation with the text. And so if you go to your text and you read Isaiah and you trace all the way to Luke's gospel, you'll find your way to these moments, and we start to imagine what may have that looked like or felt like. And you can come here and all of those words kind of are dwelling in us as they come out. It's beautiful. And in this moment, there's a sense of that a dawn is breaking.
Yeah.
There's a victory. I think this is one of the things that I love Christmas anyway. You could just get me excited about Christmas. But in the Christian tradition, Christmas is the incarnation, is this surprising turn. That God has long promised that something impossible would be done, that God himself would act on behalf of a human condition that is desperately in need of hope and rescue and salvation and redemption, but trapped within an inability for that to be possible. And that God would act. But there's all of this waiting and expectation for that, and the promise that light is going to dawn. Something's going to break. You've probably felt that in your own story, or the way that redemptive dawn comes, where you go, I can't wait any longer. I think this is a moment where the weary world rejoices, right? Though there was a heaviness and a weariness and a waiting that was so expectant. And then this gentle way that it comes, but it's also powerful and victorious. And you captured that sense of the story of the incarnation and the gospel and the announcement that the angel makes, that this is a king that will be born. And there's a particular way that you shaped her posture to come forward. And I wouldn't have caught this. We got to share that time together. But talk a little bit about how you were able to capture that part of the story.
Yeah. So as we were working on this, we noticed that posture of hers is very victorious. And if you are familiar with art, you've probably seen, the paintings of the generals that are holding their batons or holding their swords because they've just conquered land. And look at me, the horizon line is below my shoulders. And I love this because it looks like she knows that the world, it's going to be an upside down kingdom where it's not the sword that's going to conquer, but it's peace that's going to conquer. And it's the low things that are going to be raised up and the high things that are going to be brought low. So there's that confidence there. And, I think of the words of Gabriel when, he's telling Mary this and she's like, how will this be? And his words to her were, with God, nothing is impossible with God. And so that's what I see in her eyes, is that message that she's saying that to us. She's saying whatever's going on in our lives, not that we won't have suffering, not that there won't be loss or grief or pain, because that comes with love. That's part of love. But that nothing will be impossible, that there will be victory, and it will be through peace.
That was magnificent to me. This is when I say a once-in-a-generation artist, to be able to take that and say, let's lower the horizon and let's take a lily and place that lily right near the womb, and let's have the light penetrate from behind. All of those things you were able to capture in this moment. And without this time, it would have taken us years to kind of see all of those layers come through. And there's more in there that will come. That's why great art is so great, because you can go back to it and back to it and back to it. But I'm with you. And one of our excitements as a board and a team, we've been imagining tonight for a year. We knew that we wanted to end 2024 with great friends at a really busy moment of the year and bend the river and give everybody a chance to remember. Robert Frost says this of poetry, says it helps us remember what it would impoverish us to forget. And I hope tonight, whatever you're facing, whatever the moment that you're navigating or what will come in 2025, that it's things like this where there's a vision even that we get to hold on to from a distance that can maybe spark something in you, because God's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I love that this takes us back to a moment where God acted out of his great love and did something that seemed to be impossible.
Mm.
And the response was this beautiful act of faith that said, I don't know how, but may it be. Because what I'm longing for is for that upside down kingdom, for it to not be peace through a sword or peace through political conquering or peace through any other way, but our deep longing is for that peace that is all of those different layers where it's man versus God, man versus himself, man versus others, all the great conflicts, man versus nature, all brought to peace. You were able to bring all of those themes out. And before we have one final little surprise to enjoy this, talk a little bit about the technique of oil, because this is on a particular backing, and you were able to tell the story so that it could travel. How did you make that possible? And then the risk of making art, that there's no glass, right?
So many things can go wrong.
Yeah. How do you actually start the project and then develop it to the point where your final touch goes on it?
Yeah, so the project started with the conversation, thinking through ideas. And then it moved on to, I actually created like digital collages where I was just playing around with colors, with shapes, with random figures that I found off the internet to just see like what kind of effect would bring about this message that we were talking about. So I had a general idea of kind of what I wanted it to look like. And then we brought in Clementine, the model, and we did a photo shoot with her. And I took probably 500 photos just because the light just does different things. And I don't paint exactly from photos because they leave out so much. It messes up color, and but as a reference point. So we take that, and then I did probably a half size detailed drawing. So I did a detailed drawing of it that was about half size. And then I took that and I blew it up to full size. And it was at that point where I was like, whoa, Mary's very big. I hope they wanted her this big. So we blew it up, and then I transferred that drawing to the surface. And Zach, you alluded to the surface. Usually, so there's different surfaces you can use. Oftentimes the most common is canvas or linen. For this particular painting, I chose a rigid surface. It's called an ACM panel. And that was because I knew it was coming to Florida, and I live in Oregon. And so I was afraid of the temperature changes and the humidity changes because that can actually cause canvas and linen to start sagging. And the last thing you want is a saggy painting. So we chose a rigid surface, and I transferred the drawing to the surface. And then at that point, I began the painting. And for this particular kind of painting, I paint in thin layers. And if you come and look at the painting, you'll especially see that in her dress. And that's because if you just put on a thick thing of paint, oftentimes it feels flat, especially in dark areas. And so to feel like it's alive and it's real and it's interacting with light, I will use transparent layers to build that. And the light will actually go through those layers and bounce off the panel and come back to you. And that's why it feels like there will be depth to it. So some areas have less layers, some have more, and that's just depending on if they're in the light, if they're in the dark, and if I needed to go back over them because I didn't do it right the first time. So
How many hours does it take to go through that entire process? In ballpark, if you could put a number.
yeah, around 150 hours. Yeah, for the painting part and the drawing. Yeah.
Maybe we can bring it to a close with this. You spent 150 hours more probably considering this, thinking about this. You arrived in Florida and said, I hope people sense this moment of what she's saying, nothing is impossible with God. And that would travel. As you thought about this for 150 hours, how did this project personally impact you? And then was there something that you hoped to say as you leave her here and then to travel on? I mean, that's a huge investment of time.
Yeah. It was very meaningful to feel like I was looking at Mary for 150 hours. There were times where she, was up on the easel and I'd be working down here. There was times that I was actually like kneeling in front of her working on things, and it felt like we were in something together, experiencing something together. So I think my experience has been I have started to just think and wonder a lot more about Mary's relationship with Jesus. And especially in those early years, I wondered what they talked about. I wondered what, experiences they shared. And I wondered if she told the story to Jesus of Gabriel coming to her and saying, what he said to her. And so it just provoked a lot of thought for me. And I will be honest, I think it's going to be hard to leave her here and go 3,000 miles, but hopefully I'll get to see her maybe at some of the traveling exhibits. But
we
it
hope
was an honor.
That is true. Well, here's what I want to do next. We have the privilege, as Michael said, that we are trying to do this incredible work of recovering a great tradition, expressing the life and beauty of the gospel through visual art, music, symphony music, literature, poetry. And tonight we have one of our other conservatory artists. And in the Annunciation story, Mary responds to this incredible news with a song. And as our team was talking about tonight, we thought, there couldn't be a better way to allow all of us to kind of have a moment with the painting than to allow the very words that Mary sang as a song to kind of wash over all of us in the space. So I want to invite one of our conservatory artists, Megan Turnquist, to come up. I'm going to give her some space and just invite you. Well, let's bend the river and just enjoy this for just a moment as she sings the words of what is known as the Magnificat.
Mm-hmm.